Hey, everybody, welcome to this edition of Dog Walk Talk. Jake Roos here, Senior Recruiting Analyst for DawgsHQ, and very, very excited to welcome in our newest member of the DawgsHQ family, team writer Palmer Thombs. Palmer, what's up, brother?
I'm doing well. How about you? I know we both had some long trips back from Charlotte. It was exciting to be there last night in the stadium, but for both of us, and I think most Georgia fans would sacrifice a long trip home from Charlotte traffic on the way back for the outcome that they got last night.
I would have to agree with you, buddy. When you're talking about coming home and dealing with some traffic, it's a little easier to deal with when you got the W in the column for the Dogs. I know the fans feel that way, certainly. So made my job a little easier today, as I'm sure it did yours. Let's dive right in here, man. Last night, you did read or rest and react over at DawgsHQ. A great piece. I encourage everybody to go check that one out. But, how are you feeling, I guess, 24 hours away from kickoff, as it were? The Dogs come away with a tight win in Charlotte against a great Clemson team.
Yeah, like I hit on in rest and react, the defense did their job, and that's about as much as you can say. Last night, it was far from a perfect offensive showing. I think Georgia fans would like to see a lot more from the offense last night. JT Daniels did his job, with the exception of the interception there, which, going back looking at it on film, it didn't look like a terrible throw. Great play by Balin Spector there to kind of bait him into that throw. I think Georgia did about as much as they could have expected to do offensively. They didn't have a ton of opportunities to take shots downfield. The couple that come to mind would be they tried to go to A.D. Mitchell in the end zone, drew a pass interference there. So that, that's the outcome that you would have liked, picking up yardage there. I think ideally you would have liked to see some more plays beyond 20 yards, the chunk yardage plays, the explosive plays. And I think, but that's going to come. That's going to come in my opinion. And I think you got to remember that Clemson defense is very talented. They bring back a lot of pieces from a team that in their last showing, it wasn't great, but they had a lot to prove from that last showing. And they, shut down a pretty good Georgia offense last night. It wasn't a complete shutdown, but they shut them out. And I think that's about as much as you can ask for if you're a defensive coordinator. I think Georgia was able to run the ball. It was an impressive showing from that group of running backs. And I think we learned a lot about Georgia's offensive line, which I know we're going to hit on here before too long. One of the big storylines. But I think, Georgia, when they needed to run the ball, they were able to run the ball. And that was especially evident on the last drive of the game. Everyone in that stadium knew that Georgia was trying to run the ball, run the clock out, and they were able to pick up chunk yardage. Zamir White with the big physical run, running through a couple of Clemson defenders. He had a good night. I thought overall, like I said, Georgia was able to run the ball when they needed to. I think the offense is going to come, but the biggest takeaway for me was on the defensive side of the ball. Defensive line, front seven, really brought some pressure to DJ and Clemson's quarterback. I thought going into that game, I thought that Georgia was going to have to bring some pressure with that front seven, and that they were going to have to do that to make up for what they were lacking on the back end. And that wasn't the case at all. I mean, I thought the secondary played great. There were certainly some coverage sacks there, and the front seven made plays, but they were oftentimes benefiting off of great play at the back end. So overall, great team win for Georgia. Certainly an exciting one for Georgia fans, and an exciting one to look back on.
Well, listen, I'll tell you this, Palmer. You were in the stands. I was in the press box. I got to know because being up there, maybe it was a little bit different. Maybe it was a little stiffer up there, but in the crowd and amongst Georgia fans, did it ever feel comfortable that this game was going to be shut out and Georgia was going to come out on top? Because I got to tell you, just having watched a lot of these, I never felt that way.
No, I don't think anyone wearing red and black was comfortable till Zamir picked up that first down, and you did the math there. Okay, they can't call enough timeouts, and Georgia can just take a knee. As long as they don't fumble a snap here, they're good. I think no one in red and black was comfortable till the clock hit 0 there.
I'm not sure how capable anyone was of doing math at that point in the stands also. So I think that may have been an issue. I felt the same way. Look, I put it out on Twitter. It's got a ton of reactions. People, I said, look, you had to be probably sweating this until through those last 5 minutes. And like you said, until that Zamir run where you kind of shut it out and then you're able to say, okay, they're able to run the clock out here. That feels pretty comfortable. But Clemson was driving there at the end, and it felt like they had the momentum kind of running their side. You felt like 10 points was going to be enough to do it, but then they go through, pick up 3, and then suddenly it feels like they're picking up big chunk yardage again. And, I think some of your opening comments would probably translate onto Clemson as well. They wanted more of those chunk plays. Everybody does, of course, but in this era of college football, you think, your team's going to be able to make those offensive gains and kind of set themselves apart. So, it was tight. And I think Georgia fans clearly were sweating that one all the way up until the end. I'll be honest with you. I had this feeling in my gut, like Clemson's going to drop down. They're going to score the 7. They're going to tie this thing back up, and they're going to take this thing to overtime. And then it's a whole new ball game. So, the same in the stands, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, there was absolutely a feeling that this game could be going to overtime, especially like you mentioned when Clemson had first and goal. It was 10-0 at that point. Georgia did a great job defensively to hold them to 3. I think that was big there because Clemson gets 7. That's a whole different ball game. A 3-point game is a lot different than a 7-point game. Knowing that a touchdown could be the death of you.
Yeah. I mean, putting them in that red area and then able to answer defensively there, pretty strong showing by the Dogs, in my opinion, against a very talented offensive team there. I guess let's talk about it from both angles because I think both are important to cover. Like I said, I was in the press box, so it's kind of quiet up there. Everybody's kind of, okay, what's going to happen? In the stands, though, where were the big pops? What were the things that set people off? I assume being amongst the people when Chris Smith was able to sneak in there and kind of bait DJ Uagalele. That's the best shot I'm going to give. I noticed you didn't attempt his last name, so
Uiagalelei.
There you go. All right. See, look, that's why he's in the Grady Sports program, folks. But when that happened, I mean, what's the buzz like down there?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of moments in that game that you could look to as momentum swings. I think it was huge for Georgia to react to the way that they did to the ball quite literally bouncing the wrong way off that punt. It hits off of Kendall Milton. Looked like maybe I didn't get a great view of it in the stadium on the big screen on the Jumbotron there. Couldn't quite tell. I was having to text some people that were watching the game on TV saying, "Hey, who'd that bounce off of? Who'd that hit?" So going back and seeing it, I totally understand why the call stood rather than was confirmed or overturned. I don't think that there was a ton of evidence there to change it, but the way that Georgia reacted to that is what kind of defined the game. Is they get them in a 3rd and 6, they're 3rd and 7, and Chris Smith comes up with a pick 6. Great play to read. Going back and listening to his comments from post game, he knew that ball was coming his way. He baited him into it, similar to what Balen Spector did with JT Daniels.
Yes,
he baited him into the throw and made a play. Ren reacted and was on his horse all the way down. I don't think any Georgia fan was comfortable with DJ chasing him down, but great play to read and react to that and really get Georgia on the board, turn the momentum. I think at that point it was neck and neck, 0-0. Who's gonna strike first? Who's gonna get the momentum? And Georgia got the momentum, and they rode that momentum. Yeah. I think that was certainly one of the big moments. I think another thing, and again, I mentioned this in the rest and react. Similarly, I think it was important that they handled the adversity. Just like they did with the punt, they did it with JT Daniels' interception. Georgia was, I think it was the 37, if I recall. They get a 3-and-out that included 2 sacks. Clemson converts on 3rd and 9 later in the game with a 44-yard reception. Georgia responds by holding them to a field goal. And we already talked about how important that was to hold them to 3 rather than 7.
Yeah.
I think, those 3 moments right there really were marquee moments in the game, swing moments, you could say, where Georgia, kind of gave Clemson a little bit of hope, but then took it right back.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, to me that 3 versus the 7 is the moment of the game, right? I think that has to be the one that Georgia fans look back on and say, oh my God, like that probably saved everything, because, those guys stepped up and it felt like the defense basically said, all right, we'll put it on us. Like nobody's able to break through offensively. Okay, cool. Not a problem. We can shut this down. 7 sacks on the night. Incredible defensive performance there. I mean, being a little bit closer to the action, who were some of the guys that you felt like really affected that game and were able to kind of create some, I mean, look, Nakobe Dean probably put himself on the short list for the Butkus if he's able to keep that kind of performance on. And I'll tell you this, Jordan Davis moving around like he did at 6'10", 15, whatever the hell he is. I mean, he's so big, 340. He was able to split some guys. He was able to get in there, create some penetration. What did you see from those guys? And I mean, I guess moving forward, how do you feel like that bodes for the Georgia defense?
Yeah, you mentioned 2 guys there that I certainly would mention in Dean and Davis. I thought Dean's performance was incredible. Had 5 tackles on the night, led that front 7 in tackles, also 2 of those being for sacks. He really hadn't shown that ability to rush the passer, kind of known as more of a smaller guy. He's physical. He's going to stop the run, but he hadn't shown that where he was, going to get to the quarterback, take the quarterback down. I think he came into the game with 1 or 2 sacks on his career up to this point, and then finishes the night with 2 on the night. And so I think that was absolutely big. Looking at the storylines coming out of preseason camp, it was, how is Georgia, they knew that they had a guy in Nakobe Dean that was capable of being that alpha inside linebacker. But if you look back at the good Georgia teams recently, they've had them, whether that was Roquan Smith or Monty Rice, Tay Crowder, you had that alpha inside linebacker. And Nakobe Dean certainly showed last night that he is capable of being that guy for this team. I thought Devontae Wyatt had a big game. He was making himself known in the backfield. Trayvon Walker and Jalen Carter, 2 young guys, not necessarily young guys, but less experienced in options. I kind of look at Clemson, Georgia's defensive line as you've got the 2 guys that decided to return in Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt. They're experienced. You know what you're getting from them. And then you've got the 2 talented younger players in Jalen Carter and Trayvon Walker that have been waiting for their opportunity. They got that last night, and they certainly capitalized on it. We said that covers defensive line, covers the inside linebackers. I thought Nolan Smith had a good game.
Ooh.
I thought Adam Anderson had a good game. Both those guys, again, similar to some of the storylines with Trayvon and Jalen. Those 2 guys have been waiting for that opportunity to kind of come onto the scene. And Azeez Ojulari was a top 50 pick in the NFL draft. As we're recording this, Jermaine Johnson is having a great game for Florida State. So they've been stuck behind those 2 guys. And Adam Anderson and Nolan Smith came onto the scene last night. I think that they were both known, but Georgia fans are certainly looking and feeling a lot more comfortable with that play of those guys. And then I think you got to turn to the secondary. I mentioned it earlier. There were some coverage sacks, and I don't think that Georgia fans expected that you were going to see that. I think Georgia fans were expecting, hey, you got to get to the quarterback real fast because there could be some blown coverages in the secondary. There could be some opportunities for DJ to get the ball downfield and really expose the inexperience in the secondary. I thought, it was a great job of Darien Kendrick to stay composed in that game. He nearly had a pick, and I know Georgia fans would have erupted for that one. I know he would have been really excited to maybe showboat a little bit for the Clemson fans. I thought Keely Ringo held up pretty well. He had a couple PIs called against him, Amir Speed too. But I think overall those corners really held up better than you might have expected. You knew that they were talented, but it wasn't it wasn't a lack of talent. It was a lack of experience, and the Georgia showed that they had that experience. And then on the back end of the secondary, I thought Latavius Brini played well.
Yes.
Two big plays that I think are getting overlooked maybe. And I pointed them out in that Rest and React. So I really encourage you to go read that if you haven't. But two plays that really stood out to me was when Clemson got into that 1st and goal. It was 2nd down. Latavius Brini nearly intercepted the pass in the back of the end zone. 3rd down, they go at him in the corner of the end zone, and he makes a great play to kind of force. It probably was overthrown a little bit, but if he's not there, Clemson's got some athletic wide receivers that might be able to go up and get that ball. So 2 great plays. He was targeted, thrown at back-to-back times, and he came up both times. I think that was big and certainly huge. Again, we've mentioned it several times already. Huge to hold them to 3 points there rather than 7. And Brini was a huge part of that. And then Chris Smith, you knew what you had in Lewisine at safety. Started all 10 games last year. Started 2 games his freshman year. You felt very confident in the guy that you had there. But Chris Smith was kind of the question mark. And not necessarily a question mark because you saw what he was capable of in the last 5 games, but he wasn't nearly as highly recruited, highly rated. I felt like it was a big coming onto the scene moment for him last night to have that pick 6. He's kind of waited his opportunity at Georgia to be in the spotlight. Certainly was in the spotlight last night with that pick 6 as he's running home free.
Yeah. I mean, well, Kirby Smart touched on 3 guys last night post game: Chris Smith, Amir Speed, and then Latavius Brini and Jalen Johnson, and basically said, "Look, these guys had to wait their turn. They could have gone into other opportunities. There's no question about it. In the transfer portal era of college football, those guys would have been welcomed on to most squads, but they stayed around, and the plays paid off, and it." That experience, I think, really was a huge benefit for Georgia when it came to that. And like you said, I mean, Darien Kendrick, so close to one. He was ready to lap up some Clemson tears last night if he'd have gotten the opportunity. So, defense, look, it was the story of the game. Everybody knows that, right? I mean, 7 sacks, everybody's getting involved. They're basically cutting these guys loose. And credit to Kirby Smart, because I think in the post-game press conference, he really touched on something that people may not be giving enough credit to, which is he said, look, we kind of dummied this down for these guys. We know that we have athletes on this defensive side of the ball. Let's just tear them loose and let them go. I mean, I'm paraphrasing there, but that's where it was ultimately headed is, see ball, get ball. And those guys know how to do that. Clearly they showed that. On the flip side of that, not the greatest showing for the Georgia offense. Todd Monken, a lot of expectations for him heading into this season. Georgia fans wanted to see that in the opening game. Your feelings, I guess, coming out of this game and during the game on Georgia's offense, where they are, where do they go from here?
Yeah, to me, the biggest thing was it was very evident that JT Daniels was playing without one of his top receivers in Kyrus Jackson. He was on the field for punt returns, but it wasn't healthy enough to go on offense. I know Kirby was asked about it after the game and said that they felt comfortable with a 75 to 85% Jackson back there fielding the punts, especially really important in that big atmosphere to just safely field a punt, get possession.
Hold on. Let me stop you there. I feel the same way personally, because I feel like he's got that kind of experience in that position to make the good decision. Do I feel this versus do I just kind of sit on this thing? I think that was a good call for them to put him into those situations. If he's not as explosive at the receiver position, okay, I get that. But you want a guy in this kind of atmosphere where special teams, look, it's a third of the game, right? You got to win that battle. You want a guy back there who's going to make those clutch decisions. But, outside of that in the receiver game, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll add on to you there about him in the punt return game. That was something that Kirby Smart was asked about this week, and he said if Kyrus was healthy, he would be full go. He'd be full go at the punt return spot. That they were trying to figure some things out. I think that they probably would have ideally rather had a 100% someone else back there,
Sure.
but they felt very confident in his playmaking ability there. That he has that decision making where he's going to fair catch it if he needs to, but he's also capable of making a big one. And I think back a couple of years ago, Georgia had Terry Godwin back there to fair catch it, but if they needed a big play, they had Mecole Hardman to take it to the house. Kyrus Jackson is kind of the best of both worlds there, where you feel comfortable with him and his ability to possess the ball as a possession punt returner, but you also feel very confident in his ability to break one loose. I know he had a 50-something yard return last season against South Carolina.
Smart to save that energy, in my opinion. Look, if you know you're not going to get that production out of wide receiver, let's take that 80% and let's move it into punt return, right? Like let's focus it there. Let's have the guy who's going to make the right decision on what to do with it. And at 80% back there at kick and punt return, he's going to be a guy who's going to be able to affect the game in some regard.
Absolutely. And then, just looking at the receivers, like I said, it was evident that he was without one of his top targets. He had Jermaine Burton and felt comfortable with him, but he was, outside of Burton, it was a lot of new faces for JT Daniels. You hadn't seen him throwing to Ladd McConkey. You hadn't seen him throwing to Jalen Johnson. You hadn't seen him outside of the spring game. You hadn't seen him throw to A.D. Mitchell. And so, just looking at the guys that caught passes, Brock Bowers is another perfect example. And he's, to me, offensive MVP last night.
No doubt.
If I'm given a game ball offensively, it's going to Brock Bowers, because you could tell JT Daniels and Brock Bowers were on the same page. And I think that's very encouraging for Georgia fans, because I think as you get these tight ends more involved in the passing game, I think that's something that recruits want to see. I know both of us have talked with some tight ends that really are excited about, being involved in the passing game. I think it's very encouraging as you get Darnell Washington healthy to see the tight ends being used there. And so I think Bowers was a great option there last night. But again, it was evident that he was not 100% comfortable with all these receivers, working against a really, really talented team. I think the pass rush of Clemson didn't do nearly as much as the pass rush of Georgia, but they were still there. They still played a factor, and JT knew he had to get the ball out. Otherwise, he was getting hit hard by a very talented defensive line. I think as the season progresses, and Kirby said it after the game, defense is typically ahead of offense early in seasons.
Okay.
And Georgia is going to continue to progress offensively. I think UAB is a great opponent this next coming week to, get in a groove offensively as you head into an SEC schedule with South Carolina and Vanderbilt in back-to-back weeks. I mean, they won't play another non-conference game after UAB until after Thanksgiving.
Sure.
So, or right before Thanksgiving. So you want to get in that groove offensively to where you're rolling. You're clicking on all cylinders. You're not going to do that against Clemson because Clemson has a really great defense. But I think there's an opportunity to do it this coming week as they continue to get healthier, as they continue to get on the same page. JT didn't make any bad decisions. That wasn't the concern. Georgia was able to run the ball. They like we said earlier, when they needed to run the ball, they were able to run the ball. JT made good decisions throughout the game. You just didn't see that explosive play that you would have liked to see if you're a Georgia fan. And I think that's going to come. I think that's going to come as everything starts to click as the season goes along.
Well, I mean, look, if you're not going to hit explosive plays, Clemson's the team that's probably going to come against, right? I mean, given everything they have defensively, that's the team that's not going to happen with. I mean, they're coming at it from the same defensive standpoint as Georgia of we're not going to allow those things. And simultaneously, they're as talented as Georgia on that side of the ball. So they've got that to contend with.
And more experienced.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially in that second. No question about it. So, I totally agree with you. And I wrote this up last night in my, 3 keys to this win. To me, it was encouraging to see Brock Bowers come out, the freshman guy. He's got all this hype around him, and he's able to deliver. He's Georgia's leading receiver, Georgia's leading target, Georgia's top receptions. I mean, he's got it all. He hit the trifecta last night. A.D. Mitchell, he does not hit the stat sheet. However, he draws 2 PI calls. Now, one a little bit more ticky-tack than the other. One was very clear, I think. But at the same time, you've got experienced guys in that secondary who are automatically having to account for a freshman wide receiver back there. And that's a good sign for that young man's career and his path ahead, I think. This was one, like you said, I don't think JT Daniels made any bad decisions. I think people are probably giving Georgia's offense maybe a little bit more hell than they deserve, given how everybody said, can they top this Clemson defense coming into this? That was a concern for me. I wrote about it frequently. I mean, there was no doubt that this front seven was going to cause problems. Beyond that front seven, you've got one of the most experienced defensive backfields in the nation. So, yeah, it's not a total surprise that they weren't able to move these guys. Now, listen, if that's the same case against UAB, okay, now maybe we start asking some questions about Todd Monken. Maybe we start to scratch our heads and say, all right, what's going on here? But this is a top 5 matchup and a game where, look, 10-3 just doesn't happen, right? In this era of college football. I think that people have to understand that and have maybe just a little bit more perspective when it comes to that, personally.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest thing for Georgia last night offensively is looking when they were on the sidelines and the defense was out there on the field, they felt confident. They felt like that defense could keep them in a game if they needed to. And I think that's good for Georgia moving forward too. I mean, your offense isn't always going to be there. You're going to play good defenses, especially, if Georgia gets to where they want to get to and is playing some very meaningful football late in the season, you're going to play against good defenses. The biggest thing for Georgia last night was that they didn't make the big mistake offensively. And they kept themselves in the game, by avoiding that big mistake.
Yeah. Oh, no question about it. And I think that, when you're talking about the big mistakes, look, the fact of the matter is Georgia did have a big mistake. An interception in that game shifts the tide. No question about it. But to see your defense respond in the way that it did, that's got to be comforting, I think. Now
they didn't make the back-breaking mistake there.
Exactly. And neither of those teams could get that. A shout out to my guy Dean Legge over at Dawg Post, because he asked Kirby. He said, "Look, nobody could really get that kill shot," and that was really what it was. No, neither of these teams could really finish each other off. It was just going to be kind of scrapping until the end, and certainly they did that. I guess looking at it as a whole. Actually, before we get to the whole, let's talk about special teams, because there was some good and some bad for Georgia. Jack Podlesny misses a kick, a short one, one that he definitely should have made, and one that really had no chance. But you come back on the other side of it, and you got Jake Camarda, who is commanding the field with his leg on the punt. I gave Georgia the clear edge when it came to special teams. And to me, if you can win 2 out of 3 facets, you're going to win a lot of ball games. Georgia clearly did that against a very talented Clemson team. Look, I know scoring points matters a lot, especially in this era of college football. There's no doubt about it. But if you can produce 7 sacks and you can get a guy who's hanging the ball like Jake Camarda was last night, you're going to put yourself in a lot of good positions. And I use the term wizard leg at one point, because, he was bending some punts around. There seemed to be a force field against that one end zone, with where it turned to kicks. And I thought, though, that was a masterful job with the Georgia special teams, especially Camarda. To me, you mentioned Bowers as the offensive MVP. Chris Smith gets the nod, probably for game MVP, just for the huge game. I think Jake Camarda has to be right in the mix when you're talking about MVPs for that game because of what he was able to do, where he was able to put those guys, and credit to those those punt coverage units as well.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed Georgia had Arian Smith out on the edge. He was able to down some punts there deep in Clemson territory. Looking at, I will say Georgia was close to making the big mistake there on special teams when they nearly had that punt blocked, and they got the benefit of the doubt with running into the kicker, and the ball was not tipped. But it was close. It was close, and you could tell that there was some pressure on them there. So, I think in terms of special teams, like you said, Georgia has a weapon in Jake Camarda. I was sitting in one of the end zones, so it was very interesting to see his alignment and stuff when he was punting. We'll speak with him tomorrow in the weekly Monday press conference, and I'm going to make sure to ask him. He was lined up almost behind Georgia's guards. Georgia's like right between the guards and tackles when he was punting, and the snapper was snapping it diagonally. I talked to someone who punted in high school, and they said that that's just kind of to give him an advantage there. But I'm very curious to ask him about that. But like you said, I think Podlesny has shown that he's got the capability to make the big kick. I think you don't like seeing him miss a kick like that, but he redeemed himself later on. I don't think that that's a concern that Georgia has. I think, they know what they've got with Jake Camarda, and like we said earlier, they know what they've got in a good, solid return man in Kyrus Jackson.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. I mean, that's those are two facets that you're able to rely on. Podlesny, to me, he's going to put it together, right? I mean, kickers can get the yips. Everybody knows that. I think that's kind of been the case. It seems like throughout this fall camp, to see it come over into a game situation, you don't love that, but not a backbreaker here. He's going to have a chance to get that right over the course of the next couple of weeks. So I think that he can kind of get back into his groove. Not a huge problem. Now, Georgia pulls the W out. Huge W, no question. But there is a little bit of a loss in this game, and that's Tate Ratledge at your right guard position. Comes in, plays like 2 plays, and is off. Taken back into the locker room. Comes back, no pads on, got a brace on. Sitting on the training table. You've got to wonder what's going on. As a Georgia fan, we get the announcement up at the press box. He's out for now with a foot injury. Then we get the report today, DawgsHQ, that Tate Ratledge done for the season. I guess, Palmer, my question to you becomes, how big is this loss for Georgia?
Yeah, I think obviously, like we mentioned, you hate it for Tate. You hate it for a guy who played in a couple games last year, but didn't really have his big opportunity as a true freshman. And that's understandable, especially on the offensive line. But he worked his butt off, earned that spot in preseason camp. Everything that we had heard about that was that he was, very clearly one of the best 5 offensive linemen. And that was one of Georgia's priorities, is getting those 5 best offensive linemen on the field, whether that's in rotation or as the starting 5. And Tate was one of those guys. So you hate it for him to have his season come to an end and a couple plays in. And
additionally, as a Georgia fan, you have to hate that as well. Like you said, this is a clear top 5 lineman for you. This is a guy who's starting that key game. I mean, it's not a loss.
For a reason.
Not a loss, definitely.
Yeah. But in terms of replacing him, I think that the good news is this isn't the end of the world for Georgia, and they've got options that they can replace him with, whether that's Warren Erickson, who came in at right guard last night.
Yeah.
Big storyline was that Warren Erickson was healthy enough to play, and Kirby Smart had said that all along, that Georgia has had guys play with a broken hand before. You put a cast on that, and that he's ready to go. They hadn't had a center do it, and so the capability of Erickson to play both center and guard obviously came up big there for the Bulldogs last night, with him being able to plug in immediately at right guard. I don't know whether that's the future. I think the immediate future would be that. I think you also want to try, and this has been one of Georgia's priorities for a while now, is trying to get Jamari Salyer in at his more natural guard position, bumping him in from left tackle into left guard, and being able to put Justin Schaefer over guard. That you've got a perfect opportunity to do that now. Obviously, you need guys to step up at left tackle where Salyer would be leaving that spot, but you've got a bunch of talented guys that are capable of doing it. It's just a matter of them actually doing it. And again, I think a game like UAB is a great opportunity to throw someone into the fire, see how they react. Maybe, be rotating a couple of guys at that left tackle spot and seeing, hey, who's going to step up? Who's going to rise to the occasion here? You've got an opportunity here to play left tackle, start at left tackle for a top 5 team in the country. Who's going to rise to the occasion? Is it going to be Xavier Trust? Is it going to be Broderick Jones? Is it going to be Amarius Mims? All guys that were very talented coming out of high school, a couple of the top offensive linemen there in Jones and Mims. And so you want to see those guys rise to the occasion, take the opportunity and run with it.
Yeah. I told the people at DawgsHQ, I think it's great that you mentioned Mims and that, because Mims, we heard, was kind of getting some of those first team reps, kind of rotating around with Warren McClendon. Look, Warren McClendon is a zombie. You can't kill this man, all right? He's going to be unstoppable. You come for his job, you better come for his head, because he's not going to give up that right tackle spot. He's the Georgia utility player outside of Salyer, in my opinion. I think he's got right tackle locked down. So, yeah, I think you look at that rotation of those 3 guys. As you said, you want to get Salyer in there. Look, I don't think that affects his NFL prospects very much, because Isaiah Wynn obviously bumped out to left tackle his senior year, played admirably, and has had a fantastic NFL career up until this point, kind of holding it down for the Patriots on the offensive line. So Salyer is proving his worth, no question about it, no matter where he plays. Yes, you feel like he's probably a guard. I thought when I saw him in high school, probably the best guard prospect I've ever seen. But the fact that he can step out there, hey, that ain't going to hurt your draft status, I promise.
And he's started a full season there too. So, it's not just that he's proven it once, that he's done it a couple times. He did it for a full SEC slate.
Yeah. And
in all SEC slate.
Yeah. And then to march him back out there in a year where you say, all right, look, we've got all this depth. We've got these guys who want to test at left tackle. And then for him to come back out against a top 5 team and you say, look, these guys are good, right? We feel good about these guys. We feel good about their futures, but there's no question that this experience and what this guy brings to the table is not the best option. And boy, he held it down for the left tackle spot. I agree with you totally. I think that you're going to see a rotation moving forward. I think that Broderick Jones, probably the guy who's going to get that look. Georgia wants to know, is that guy on the roster right now, the future left tackle? Jamari Salyer, ideally, like you said, you put him at guard. Suddenly, if you can get a guy to emerge at left tackle, that changes the whole dynamic of this offensive line, because you've got McClendon, who's played a ton of snaps. You've got Schaefer, who's been around the program since the Reagan administration. You've got Jamari Salyer bumping into probably his natural spot and where he will play in the NFL. And then, the center position, a little bit up for grabs. Sure, that's fine, because I think you have 2 capable options in Erickson and Van Pran. I think Van Pran showed that last night. He can handle that. He's a guy who's going to be able to get in there, control the offense. Erickson, a utility player, in my opinion, at this point in the interior. And then at the left tackle spot, okay, do you have a guy who can come in there and be that guy? If you got 2 left tackles, that's a great problem to have right there. I mean, there aren't many teams that have one true one. If you got Jamari Salyer and you have to plug him back in there, that's fine. Okay, great. But if you have another guy right behind him, and let's say that the battle really heats up between Truss and Jones, and maybe you're able to even get 3 deep there, and imagine a true freshman in Mims coming in and being able to challenge for a tackle spot. And I hedge that by saying, I think Amarius is going to get meaningful snaps at a tackle position over the course of this season. I don't see a situation necessarily where you redshirt that guy. I don't think he's Isaiah Wilson. Basically, it seems like he's come to camp prepared. We got those reports of him going with the first team. But listen, if there's anywhere on a team to have a dearth of experience and a dearth of guys who are available, it's left tackle. Everybody in the country's falling over themselves for that.
Yeah, Georgia proved last night that they've got a lineup there, even without Ratledge, that they've got a lineup that they feel comfortable running with between Salyer at left tackle, Schaefer at left guard, Van Pran at center, Erickson at right guard, Warren McClendon at right tackle. They feel confident in that. They were able to go beat a top 5 Clemson team with that lineup. But like we said, if someone else can emerge at that left tackle spot and be it any of those 3 options, then you feel comfortable with another lineup where you can then utilize Salyer at his more natural position, Schaefer and Erickson, Schaefer in there somewhere.
Sure.
Erickson as a rotational guy, be it at guard or center. You're able to keep everyone fresh. And then you've got, like we said, Warren McClendon has that right tackle spot locked down. All you need there for another another lineup that you can feel very confident in is someone to emerge at left tackle. And Georgia's got 3 very capable options.
Yeah, I think Matt Luke's breaking out the good cigars if that ends up being the case. He's going to feel very, very comfortable about what he's got up front. And I'll be honest with you, I'm interested to hear your take. I think that's possible. I think that Broderick Jones, this stretch presents itself very well for him to be able to get live game experience, do it while the band's playing and play against maybe some lesser talented opponents. I'm not saying that he's playing against the likes of Clemson, certainly, but if he's able to kind of get those reps under his belt, that, there's no fall camp is one thing. Spring camp is one thing. G-Day is one thing. To do it against a real live opponent when it matters, that's a whole different ball game. And if Broderick Jones is able to deliver on the promise that he has during those opportunities, sky's the limit, man. Georgia's offensive line would be all the better for that opportunity.
And like you said, you definitely think it's a possibility. I thought it was a possibility before this injury to Ratledge. I thought it was a possibility that you were going to see Jamari Salyer trot out there at left tackle against Clemson, knowing the opponent that you're going against, knowing that front 7 that you're going against, get through that game, and then you try things out over the course of September so that you can figure it out by October. I mean, you've got, like you said, it's not a cakewalk. UAB is a good team.
Yeah.
South Carolina's a good team. Vanderbilt's a good team. You've got 2 SEC teams there and a very talented UAB team. But like we said, it's not Clemson. It's not Florida. It's not Auburn. It's not the hostile road environment. Again, that's another thing. You get 2 home games in there. You're not trying to throw some, a newbie out there in a hostile road environment. And Vanderbilt, you go on the road to Vanderbilt, that's not too much of a hostile environment. Last time Georgia was in there, it was a sea of red.
Yeah, that's fair. That's completely fair.
So that you're able to, by October, when you've got some of your tougher games rolling around in Auburn, Florida, Arkansas is a very talented team. In Kentucky, there's another one. October is the meat of this schedule. Especially after you move on from Clemson, that game is in the rear view now. Georgia got the W there. You've got a little bit lighter of a schedule here over these next 3 games to round out September. You can figure out a lot about your team in these next 3 games so that you can roll into that meat of the schedule ready to go.
Well, and I tend to go with this almost collegiate reference here. Like, to me, Broderick Jones is coming into Math 1101, right? Math 1102. Like, these aren't gimme courses, but if you ace the tests, all right, maybe we can clip you out of the 3rd level, and now you're suddenly being able to get into those higher level courses, right? I think that those aren't, like you said, those are 2 SEC games and a talented UAB team. you still feel confident that a guy of that caliber should be able to match up with anybody on those squads, period. There's no doubt about it. You don't recruit Broderick Jones if you don't think that he can beat the talent at UAB. And you certainly don't recruit him if you don't think he can hold his own against the likes of South Carolina and frankly, Arkansas and Vanderbilt. I mean, that just is what it is. I mean, he's going to be relied upon in those situations. And if he's able to deliver, yeah, then now suddenly you feel comfortable, I think, moving forward. I guess moving forward, yeah, everybody's got concerns about the offense, right? That's the big takeaway. And we'll do the preview show for UAB later this week. But, going into Monday, if you're Kirby Smart, where is the attention to detail? Where do you talk about, the composure and the focus, those buzzwords that he's kind of been honed in on in this offseason and even last night after the game, where do you kind of turn the focus on Monday? In my opinion, it's got to be on Todd Monken and those guys, because you got to think, look, unchain these guys on Saturday against UAB and the defense. If they're able to do that against a Clemson offense and that offensive line, you feel like they can do that again. You really, I think, want to get your young guys in there and rotate it in against UAB and see, hey, do we have, 4 or 5 other guys who can get in there and register sacks and kind of drive this number up. So in my opinion, got to be a focus on the offense this week. Where do you kind of tune it, though? Like you said, I mean, I felt like the running game was capable. Maybe there's some retooling on the offensive line. How do you kind of deal with this JT and the wide receiver thing?
Yeah, I think for me, it would start on the offensive line, and that's got to be your first focus, because if you can't get that right, you're not going to be able to run the ball, and you're not going to be able to keep the quarterback on his feet, so you can't throw the ball. And so, and especially at left tackle, if that's where Georgia has to figure things out.
But to be hold on. But to be fair, you feel like okay. I'm not saying you. I hate to put that on you, but you can hit me back if you do feel this way. I personally feel that's not a concern against UAB. I feel like I feel like you could march Devin Willock and Chad Lindbergh and, the second, maybe third string line out there against UAB and feel somewhat comfortable, right?
Right. But Georgia shouldn't have any concerns against UAB. Let's be honest. I mean, to me, this UAB game that's coming up, and like you said, we'll preview it later on here this week. To me, this UAB game is about figuring things out for that meat of the schedule that I mentioned later or earlier in the show. That October stretch where you've got some tough games in there, you've got some trap games in there. Georgia, on paper, should win them all, but you've got to have, guys, depth. You've got to have that you can rely on if an injury happens mid-game. You've got to feel confident in the guys that you're rolling out there to start the game. And so, to me, that's where the offensive line is the big concern. I don't think the offense as a whole is a concern. I think, just again, credit to Clemson and what they have built, a talented, experienced group on defense. That's probably the best defense that Georgia will see this year, at least until October, and maybe until late in the season, be it, whatever significant football Georgia is playing at the tail end of the season. There's a chance that Georgia doesn't see a team as good as Clemson until that point. And so I think, there's not a ton of concerns for me going into this next game. I think it's just about doing it and staying composed, being patient and understanding that this offense is going to click. You've just got to start doing it. I mean, it's as simple as that. You've just got to, get the good reps, get the good feeling, it's almost like a muscle memory type deal here, where you want to leave that UAB game, and you want to leave this week, be it practice UAB into the next week. You want to leave this week with a good feeling about JT Daniels and his connection with these receivers, and building that chemistry, that momentum that you can roll into SEC play here before too long.
Well, I was going to say that, you kind of want to go into it thinking that this is, your Montana to get things worked out, but that didn't work out too well for Washington. But you got to hope that this is your Texas ULL game, or your Kentucky going up against ULM. This is kind of where you can create some familiarity amongst those guys, some comfort. And JT Daniels knows, look, if this guy's doing this, and it's not a mere speed doing this, because he knows what AD Mitchell is going to do. He's seen that guy do that route 1,000 times. All right. He can close in on that. Okay. So if I don't know that, where am I going to go? I think that this UAB game, a great preview for that. And speaking of previews, we'll be back later this week to touch on that UAB game. But let's save something for those people later this week. Palmer, hey, man, I got to say, I'm naming you MVP of the show for the first one. The second, I guess, Dog Walk Talk. Look, I'm naming you MVP for the rest of the season. You're not going to top Ivan Maisel, but in terms of our site, I'm giving you the nod, brother.
Hey, you're the one taking this podcast and going to produce it and get it posted. So MVP goes to you.
Don't put that on me, man. I told you I don't know what I'm doing just yet. All right. So I'm going to get it figured out. But thanks everybody for tuning in this week to Dog Walk Talk. We will be back to preview UAB later this week. And hopefully soon you can find us on all your podcast formats. But for now, we'll be on DawgsHQ and YouTube. You can find us there. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's DawgsHQ, unsurprisingly, I guess. But for myself, Palmer Thombs, shout out from Dog Walk Talk. Thanks for everybody joining us.